Are you still waiting? Have you ever sat very still and asked yourself a question that felt a little too sharp to ignore? Are you waiting for someone to save you? This video is not about perfect English, or perfect love, or a perfect family. It is about 4 quiet weeks of my life in the United States, where marriage felt fragile, children felt everything, and I slowly realized something uncomfortable. Love is not a rescue mission. If you feel tired, stuck, or secretly hoping someone will come and fix it all, this story might feel like it's talking directly to you. Now let me say this slowly, because this matters. Many people don't quit learning English because they are lazy. They quit because their life feels heavy. When your heart is busy surviving, your brain does not want grammar. Neuroscience backs this up. Under emotional stress, the brain shifts into protection mode. Memory goes down. Motivation goes quiet. So if you've been failing at listening, reading, or speaking English, it might not be about English at all. It might be about waiting. 4 weeks ago, in the US, I caught myself waiting. Waiting for my partner to notice how tired I was. Waiting for love to feel easier. Waiting for life to calm down so I could finally focus on myself, and maybe, yes, finally practice English again. In my head, the story sounded reasonable. When things get better, I'll start. But the truth was simpler and harder. Nothing was getting better because I was waiting. There is a strange myth we carry into adulthood, especially into marriage. We think love will rescue us. That if we choose the right person, or move to the right country, or survive long enough, someone will eventually say, "I've got you now. You can rest." But real life doesn't work like a movie. Real love does not arrive with a helicopter and a rope ladder. Real love shows up quietly and asks, "What are you choosing today?" During those weeks, my home was not loud. No big fights. No dramatic scenes. Just silence layered on top of responsibility. Bills. School schedules. Dinners that tasted fine but felt empty. And children. Children who notice tone more than words. Research in family psychology shows kids pick up emotional shifts long before adults admit them. I saw it in their eyes. They didn't know the story, but they felt the waiting. And here's where English slipped in, very gently. Not in a classroom way. In a life way. Simple phrases. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm just tired. These are easy sentences, but they carry weight. When you repeat them every day slowly, they become mirrors. Listening practice is not just sound, it's attention. Speaking practice is not performance, it's permission. One morning, standing in the kitchen, I realized something almost embarrassing. I was waiting to be rescued from my own life. Waiting for love to motivate me. Waiting for confidence to appear. Waiting for English to feel easy before using it. Psychology calls this external locus of control, believing change comes from outside you. And the brain loves this illusion because it removes responsibility. But it also removes power. So let me ask you gently, not as a teacher but as a tired human talking to another tired human, what are you waiting for? A partner to change? A better time? Perfect confidence? Your brain will happily keep waiting forever. It is very patient when avoidance feels safe. The shift didn't come with fireworks. It came with a sentence I said out loud, slowly in English to myself. No one is coming. Not in a sad way. In a freeing way. Studies on self-directed learning show that small acts of agency, tiny decisions you control, restore motivation faster than big emotional speeches. One sentence. One breath. One choice. This channel is not here to rescue you. And neither is love. But maybe together, we can help you stop waiting. 4 weeks changed me. If you want to understand how someone changes, don't look for dramatic moments. Look for repetition. 4 weeks sounds short, almost insignificant, like something you could easily forget. But the brain doesn't measure time the way calendars do. It measures patterns. And during 4 quiet weeks in the United States, my patterns changed, slowly, stubbornly, and then all at once. At first, nothing felt different. Same house. Same marriage. Same routines with the kids. Mornings were rushed. Evenings were tired. My body moved, but my mind stayed somewhere behind, like a browser tab left open and draining energy. Cognitive science calls this low-grade chronic stress. It doesn't scream. It hums. And when it hums long enough, motivation disappears without you noticing. I used to think living in America would somehow upgrade my life automatically. New country, new language, new chances. But here's the truth no one puts in motivational videos. Geography doesn't fix emotional habits. The same waiting followed me across the ocean. I was still hoping love would feel lighter, marriage would feel clearer, and confidence would arrive before I spoke up, especially in English. Week 1 was denial. I told myself I was just tired. That things would settle soon. This is a common psychological defense called normalization. You convince yourself discomfort is normal so you don't have to act. During this week, my English practice was almost zero. I listened to videos without hearing them. I read words without absorbing meaning. My brain was there, but not present. Week 2 was irritation. Small things started to bother me. A tone of voice. A look. Silence at dinner. Neuroscience explains this well. When emotional needs are unmet, the brain becomes hyperalert to threats. Everything feels personal. My kids asked simple questions, and I felt overwhelmed. My partner said nothing, and I felt rejected. Inside, I was still waiting, waiting for reassurance, waiting for rescue. Then something subtle happened in week 3. I noticed my own waiting. That sounds small, but awareness is not passive. Studies in mindfulness psychology show that noticing a pattern activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for choice. The moment I caught myself thinking, if only they would, I felt a shift. Not relief. Responsibility. This is also when English came back, quietly. Not as a goal. As a tool. I started speaking out loud when no one was listening. Very slow. Very simple. Today is hard. I feel tired. But I am here. Language learning research shows that emotional relevance increases retention. When words match your inner state, they stick. This wasn't practice for a test. It was practice for life. Week 4 was not magical.
No sudden happiness.
But there was movement. I stopped waiting for conversations to happen and started them, awkwardly, imperfectly. In marriage therapy, this is called shifting from reactive to active communication. You don't wait for the right mood. You create space. Even my kids responded differently. When I spoke slower, listened more, they leaned in. Children mirror regulation. When you slow down, they feel safer. Here's the part that surprised me most. The more I chose small actions, the less I needed saving. Motivation didn't arrive first. Action came first. Behavioral psychology has proven this again and again. Behavior leads emotion more often than the other way around. You don't wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness follows like a shadow. So 4 weeks didn't change my life because America is special. They changed me because I stopped outsourcing my agency. I stopped believing love would rescue me. Love became something I practiced, daily, imperfectly, like English. If you're watching this and thinking, I don't have 4 weeks, that's your brain negotiating. You don't need 4 weeks. You need one honest moment. One sentence you say out loud. One choice you make without waiting. Change doesn't announce itself. It repeats itself. Love looked like hope. There is a very specific kind of hope that feels warm but quietly dangerous. It's the hope that says, love will fix this. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. It's the kind of hope that lets you endure discomfort without changing anything. And for a long time, longer than I want to admit, this was how love looked to me. In my mind, love was supposed to be a soft place to land. A buffer between me and exhaustion. When life felt heavy, I told myself, at least I have love. When English felt hard, I told myself, once things feel better at home, I'll focus. Psychologists call this emotional buffering, using one area of life to avoid facing another. It feels reasonable. It even sounds healthy. But over time, it quietly trains you to wait. During those 4 weeks in the US, I began to see how this version of love had shaped my marriage. There was no villain.
No betrayal.
Just 2 tired people carrying silent expectations. I was hoping love would notice my effort without me naming it. Hoping my partner would sense my fatigue and respond in the exact way I needed. Hope in this form became a guessing game. And guessing is exhausting. Research on relationship dynamics shows that unspoken expectations are one of the strongest predictors of emotional distance. When we don't articulate needs, the brain fills the gap with assumptions. Assumptions turn into stories. Stories turn into resentment. And resentment rarely sounds loud. It sounds quiet, polite, controlled. Like everything is fine. This is where the idea of rescue sneaks in. I wasn't waiting for dramatic romance. I was waiting for relief. For someone else to lower the emotional temperature so I wouldn't have to. Love, in my imagination, was supposed to carry me when I felt weak. But real love doesn't carry adults. It walks beside them. And sometimes, it waits for you to speak first. English became a strange mirror during this time. I noticed how often I avoided speaking because I wanted to sound ready, fluent, confident. This is the same pattern. Waiting until it feels safe. Language learning theory calls this the affective filter, when fear and emotion block input. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Waiting for confidence is just waiting with better manners. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone and said a sentence out loud slowly in English. Love is not here to save me. The sentence felt heavy at first, like an accusation. But then it softened. It felt honest. Neuroscience tells us that naming reality reduces emotional reactivity. The brain relaxes when ambiguity disappears, even if the truth is hard. When I stopped seeing love as rescue, something shifted. I stopped measuring it by how protected I felt and started noticing how present I was. Love wasn't supposed to remove discomfort. It was supposed to make discomfort survivable, together, but not silently. This realization didn't break my marriage. It clarified it. I began to speak needs without wrapping them in hope. Simple sentences. Direct. Calm. I need rest. I feel disconnected. Can we talk? These are not romantic lines. But relationship psychology shows that clarity builds safety faster than charm ever could. And here's the positive part, the part one wish someone had told me earlier. When you stop asking love to rescue you, it becomes lighter. Kinder. More real. The pressure lifts. Love stops being a test and starts being a practice. The same thing happened with English. I stopped hoping it would click someday. I used it as it was, imperfect, slow, human. And strangely, that's when it started to feel less heavy. Hope is not the enemy. Passive hope is. Love doesn't disappear when it stops rescuing you. It grows up. Marriage without drama. Most people imagine marriage problems as loud, shouting, crying, doors closing too hard. But some of the hardest seasons in a marriage are almost silent. No drama. No explosions. Just two people moving carefully around each other, like furniture that's been in the same place for years. You don't trip over it anymore, but you also don't really see it. That was my marriage during those weeks. On the surface, everything worked. We paid bills. We showed up for the kids. We asked practical questions. Did you send the email? What time is pickup? Functioning, according to sociology, is not the same as connecting. And disconnection doesn't announce itself. It blends in. Psychologists call this emotional withdrawal. It often appears during periods of long-term stress, especially in families with young children. The brain, trying to conserve energy, reduces emotional output. Less talking. Less feeling. Less risk. From the outside, it looks calm. Inside, it feels lonely. And loneliness inside a relationship is one of the most confusing emotions there is. I noticed it in small details. Conversations stayed safe. Nothing personal. Nothing sharp. Nothing real. Silence became a kind of agreement. Not a healthy one, but a mutual one. We weren't fighting, but we weren't choosing each other either. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Silence can feel respectful while quietly eroding intimacy. During this time, I also noticed how this silence affected my English practice. When you stop expressing yourself emotionally, your language shrinks. Linguistic studies show that expressive language and emotional engagement are tightly linked. If you avoid feelings, you avoid words. My vocabulary didn't disappear, but my voice did. One night, I tried a small experiment. Instead of waiting for the right moment, I spoke into the silence. Slowly, calmly, not to win, not to accuse, just to exist. I said, I feel far away from you lately.
No metaphors. No blame.
Just presence. The reaction wasn't dramatic.
No instant repair.
But something important happened. The silence broke. Not shattered, cracked. Marriage therapists often say that repair begins not with solutions, but with naming reality. When something unnamed becomes named, the nervous system relaxes. The threat becomes manageable. What surprised me was how much courage this took. Not emotional courage, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't get applause. Neuroscience explains why. Speaking up risks rejection, and the brain treats social rejection like physical pain. So it convinces you to stay quiet for peace. But peace without connection is just comfort with distance. The positive shift didn't come from one conversation. It came from a pattern. Small, honest check-ins.
No rescuing. No fixing.
Just showing up verbally. This is supported by relationship research. Frequent low-intensity communication builds trust more effectively than rare intense talks. English played a strange supporting role here. Because I was speaking slowly anyway, I learned to pause. To listen. To choose words carefully. Slowness created safety. For me. For my partner. Even for the kids, who sensed the change in tone. Studies on family communication show that tone matters more than content, especially for children. Marriage without drama is not boring. It's revealing. When nothing is loud, you hear what's missing. And what was missing wasn't love. It was choice. Choosing to speak instead of waiting. Choosing presence over prediction. This part of the journey taught me something essential. You don't need a crisis to change a relationship. You need attention. Attention is active. Silence is passive. And passivity is just waiting dressed as peace. Children felt the shift. Children rarely understand the full story, but they always feel the tone. You can explain nothing to them and still teach them everything. During those weeks, before I could clearly name what was changing in my marriage, my children already knew. Not with words. With behavior. Developmental psychology has a simple but uncomfortable truth. Kids are emotional radar systems. They track micro-expressions, pauses, energy shifts. When adults withdraw emotionally, children don't think, my parents are stressed. They think, something is wrong with me. Not logically, biologically. Their nervous systems are wired to assume responsibility. I noticed it in the quiet ways first. One child asked more questions than usual. Another became unusually independent. These are classic responses to uncertainty. Research shows that when family emotional predictability drops, children either seek closeness or distance. Both are survival strategies. Neither is random. This hit me harder than any adult conversation, because I realized something important. Waiting doesn't stay private. When you wait to speak, wait to act, wait to choose, your children wait too. They wait for emotional cues. They wait for safety signals. And silence is not neutral. Silence is confusing. One evening, as we were sitting together, I answered a simple question in English without thinking about it. Very slowly. Very naturally. The sentence wasn't impressive. But my tone was present. Attuned. Language learning research calls this contextual input, language tied to real emotional moments. Children respond to it instantly. Their bodies relax. Their attention sharpens. That moment made something clear. My kids didn't need a perfect parent. They needed a regulated one. Neuroscience confirms this. Children borrow regulation from adults. When you slow down, speak clearly, and stay emotionally available, their nervous systems sync with yours. You don't have to fix the environment. You become the environment. This changed how I saw both parenting and English practice. Speaking slowly wasn't just for pronunciation. It was for presence. Listening wasn't just for comprehension. It was for connection. When I stopped waiting for things to feel right and started showing up consistently, my children responded almost immediately. I also noticed something hopeful. When I modeled speaking without being rescued, without perfection, they followed. One child tried new words. Another asked for clarification instead of withdrawing. Educational psychology shows that children learn resilience not from instruction, but from observation. They don't copy what you say. They copy how you handle uncertainty. This is where the message becomes positive, even powerful. You don't need to fix your marriage first to support your kids. You don't need flawless English. You need coherence. Your words, tone, and actions need to point in the same direction. That direction is forward. When children feel emotional safety, their learning accelerates. This is backed by countless studies. Stress narrows attention. Safety expands it. The same applies to adults. The same applies to you watching this video. If your English feels stuck, ask yourself, not critically, but kindly, do I feel safe enough to try? My children didn't ask me to rescue them. They watched to see if I would rescue myself. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just by choosing to engage instead of waiting. That choice taught them more than any lecture ever could. Here's the quiet punchline. Kids don't need parents who have it all together. They need parents who stay emotionally present while figuring it out. And when you do that, slowly, imperfectly, you give them permission to do the same. America didn't save me. There is a fantasy many of us carry, even if we never say it out loud. It sounds like this: if I could just get there, things would be better. Another country. Another city. Another environment. The fantasy isn't foolish, it's human. Our brains are wired to believe change of scenery equals change of self. But after 4 weeks in the United States, I learned something both disappointing and deeply freeing. America didn't save me. Nothing was wrong with the place. The streets worked. The systems worked. Life looked efficient from the outside. But psychology has a term for what happens when your internal world doesn't match the promise of your environment: cognitive dissonance. You expect relief. You feel pressure instead. And when expectations collapse quietly, the disappointment turns inward. At first, I blamed myself. Why am I still tired? Why does learning English still feel heavy when I'm surrounded by it? This is a common trap. Studies on expatriate adjustment show that people often experience increased stress after relocation because the brain is overloaded. New cues, new norms, new constant decision-making. Your mental energy goes to survival, not growth. I realized something important. I wasn't failing in America. I was still waiting in America. Waiting for the country to give me confidence. Waiting for immersion to magically unlock fluency. Waiting for my marriage to feel easier because the backdrop had changed. Geography doesn't erase patterns. It exposes them. This realization was uncomfortable, but also empowering. Because if America didn't save me, then maybe nothing outside me ever would. And that means the door was always inside. Psychology calls this an internal locus of control, the belief that your actions matter. People with this belief don't avoid difficulty, they engage it. English became a daily reminder of this. I heard it everywhere. But hearing doesn't equal learning. Language acquisition research is clear. Exposure without engagement produces very little progress. I had been exposed for years. What changed during those weeks was my participation. I stopped waiting for English to feel friendly and started using it as it was: imperfect, useful, alive. Marriage shifted too. Not because America made it better, but because I stopped asking the environment to do emotional work for me. When you believe a place will rescue you, you give up responsibility. When you let that belief go, you regain agency. Here's the positive truth I want you to hear clearly. Real change doesn't come from upgrades. It comes from alignment. When your actions, values, and voice move together, progress accelerates. This is supported by behavioral science. Consistent small actions in stable environments outperform dramatic changes in unstable ones. America didn't save me, but it gave me clarity. It removed excuses. There was no one to blame. No future location to wait for. Just the present moment asking a simple question: what will you choose today? If you're watching this and thinking, I'll start when my situation changes, pause. Your situation might never change enough to feel safe. Safety is built, not delivered. One sentence spoken. One habit practiced. One honest choice made without applause. The myth of rescue dies hard. But when it does, something better takes its place. Responsibility. Not the heavy kind, the freeing kind. The kind that says you don't need saving to move forward. America didn't save me. And that's exactly why I started saving myself. English in real life. Most people imagine learning English as something separate from life, like a clean desk with a notebook, a video playing in the background, and a version of themselves who is calm, focused, and not emotionally tired. That version almost never shows up. Real English, the kind that actually sticks, shows up in the middle of life, when things are messy, unfinished, and human. That's what I learned during those weeks. English didn't arrive as motivation. It arrived as necessity. Not in big conversations, not in speeches, but in tiny moments that carried real weight. A short reply at the grocery store. A slow sentence at home. A pause before answering a child's question. Linguists call this functional language use, language tied directly to purpose. And purpose changes everything. Before, I treated English like something I needed to prepare for. I wanted to feel ready, confident, fluent enough to avoid embarrassment. This is a classic barrier in second language learning. Research on adult learners shows that fear of negative evaluation is one of the strongest predictors of avoidance. We don't avoid because we can't learn. We avoid because we don't want to be seen trying. But life doesn't wait for readiness. In marriage, in parenting, in daily survival, you speak or you disappear. During those weeks, I chose to speak, even when my sentences were simple, slow, and sometimes wrong. And something surprising happened. The more I used English in real life, the less emotional weight it carried. There's a neurological reason for this. When language is tied to emotion and action, the brain encodes it more deeply. It's not just stored as information, it becomes experience. That's why you can forget grammar rules but remember the sentence you said during a meaningful moment. Emotion acts like glue. I started using English as a tool for regulation. Saying things out loud helped organize my thoughts. I need a moment. I'm not upset, just tired. These sentences are basic, but they are powerful. Psychologists call this effect labeling, naming emotions to reduce their intensity. Speaking calms the nervous system. Silence lets stress spread. This changed how I practiced listening too. I stopped watching English content passively and started listening with intention. Short clips. Slow speech. Real stories. Not to memorize, but to mirror. Language learning theory supports this. Comprehensible input works best when it's just slightly above your level and emotionally engaging. Boring content doesn't teach. Relevant content does. Even my kids noticed. They didn't correct me. They didn't judge. They responded. Because communication is not about perfection, it's about connection. Studies in family communication show that mutual effort matters more than accuracy. When people feel understood, they become patient listeners. The biggest shift was internal. English stopped being a test of my worth. It became a bridge. A way to stay present instead of withdrawing. In moments where I would normally wait, I spoke. Slowly. Calmly. Honestly. Here's the encouraging part. You don't need hours a day. You need moments. Real ones. A sentence you use repeatedly. A phrase that matches your life. That's how fluency actually grows. Not in bursts of motivation, but in patterns of use. English in real life isn't impressive. It's effective. And effectiveness builds confidence quietly, without drama. So if you're waiting to feel ready, stop. Life is already talking to you. Answer it, slowly, imperfectly, and out loud. The waiting pattern. If you watch yourself closely, you'll notice something almost funny. You don't just wait once. You repeat waiting. Different situations, same pattern. Waiting for the right mood. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for someone else to move first. Psychologists call this a behavioral loop, and once it's established, the brain runs it automatically. Like background music you forgot you chose. I saw this pattern clearly during those weeks. Not because something dramatic happened, but because nothing did. My days looked fine from the outside. Inside, I kept postponing small actions. I'll speak later. I'll practice tomorrow. I'll say something when it feels safe. The brain loves these promises because they reduce discomfort without requiring change. Neuroscience explains why waiting feels so convincing. When you avoid a mildly uncomfortable action, your brain releases a small amount of relief. That relief acts as a reward. Over time, the brain learns, waiting equals safety. This is how procrastination forms, not from laziness, but from threat avoidance. And emotional threat, like embarrassment or rejection, counts as real danger to the nervous system. The problem is, relief fades. And the cost accumulates. Each time you wait, your confidence shrinks slightly. Not dramatically. Quietly. This is called learned hesitation. The more you delay, the harder starting feels. Eventually, the brain confuses familiarity with correctness. Waiting becomes normal. I noticed this pattern not just in English, but in my marriage. Waiting for the right moment to speak. Waiting for clarity before acting. Waiting for love to feel easier. These waits felt responsible, polite, mature. But underneath, they were the same loop, avoidance dressed as patience. Here's where awareness changes everything. Research in cognitive behavioral therapy shows that identifying a pattern weakens it. The moment you say, "Oh, I'm waiting again," you create space between impulse and action. That space is choice. During week 3, I started interrupting the loop with something very small. Not a big decision. A sentence. I spoke before I felt ready. In English. Slowly. My voice shook a little. Nothing bad happened. The world didn't collapse. This is exposure learning. The brain updates its threat model based on experience, not logic. Each interruption made the next one easier. Not because fear disappeared, but because evidence accumulated. I can survive this. I can speak and stay safe. This is how confidence is actually built. Not through positive thinking, but through tolerated discomfort. The same applied emotionally. Instead of waiting for the perfect emotional state, I acted with the state I had. Tired. Uncertain. Human. Relationship research shows that responsiveness matters more than readiness. Showing up imperfectly builds trust faster than waiting to show up well. Here's the positive twist. The waiting pattern isn't a flaw. It's a protective habit that outlived its usefulness. Your brain learned it to keep you safe once. Now it's keeping you small. And the brain is adaptable. It updates quickly when given new data. You don't need to eliminate waiting. You need to shorten it. Notice it sooner. Interrupt it gently. Speak one sentence earlier than you normally would. Listen 1 minute longer. These microactions rewire the loop. The waiting pattern feels personal, but it's universal. You're not broken. You're just human. And humans change not when they're rescued, but when they choose movement over pause. One small decision. People love transformation stories because they imagine a single, dramatic turning point. A night of clarity. A powerful conversation. A moment where everything clicks. Real change almost never works that way. What actually shifts a life is something far less exciting, and far more reliable. One small decision, repeated when no one is watching. During those weeks, my decision wasn't heroic. It was almost boring. I decided to stop waiting before speaking. Not forever. Not in every situation. Just once a day. One sentence earlier than felt comfortable. That was it. Behavioral science supports this approach. The brain resists big change because it perceives it as threat. But it tolerates small, specific actions. This is why microhabits outperform motivation. They don't require belief. They require permission. The first day, the decision felt awkward. My sentence was slow. Plain. I overthought the words. But something important happened. I acted without needing emotional alignment. Psychologists call this behavior-first change. Action leads. Emotion follows later, if at all. That night, I noticed my body felt different. Not happier. Lighter. Like something heavy had shifted slightly to the side. Neuroscience explains this. When you complete a small action you've been avoiding, the brain releases dopamine. Not for success, but for progress. Progress is the signal the nervous system trusts. The decision also changed how I approached English. Instead of studying, I reused the same sentence in different moments. Repetition with variation. Language acquisition research shows this is how fluency forms. Patterns, not vocabulary lists. The sentence became familiar. Familiarity reduced fear. Fear reduction increased use. In my marriage, the same principle applied. I stopped waiting for the perfect emotional setup and spoke when the thought was still forming. Not to fix. To reveal. Relationship psychology confirms that early expression prevents emotional buildup. When feelings stay small, they're manageable. When they wait, they ferment. The surprising part wasn't that things improved quickly. It was that improvement didn't require more effort, just earlier effort. I wasn't doing more. I was delaying less. That distinction matters. This small decision also affected my kids. They watched me engage instead of withdraw. Educational psychology shows that children model timing more than content. They learn when to act by watching when adults act. I wasn't teaching them English or communication. I was teaching them courage through timing. Here's the hopeful truth. You don't need discipline to change. You need a decision small enough that your brain doesn't fight it. One sentence. One moment. One earlier step. Waiting feels safe, but safety without movement becomes a cage. A small decision opens the door. If you're listening to this, don't ask yourself what big change you need. Ask yourself what you're delaying by a few seconds that you could do now. That's where change lives. Quiet. Practical. Repeatable. One small decision doesn't rescue you. It returns you to yourself. Love is a choice. Love feels like something that happens to you. A feeling. A spark. A natural response. But when you live inside a relationship long enough, especially during quiet, demanding seasons, you start to see a different truth. Love is not an emotion you wait for. It's a choice you make repeatedly, often when the emotion is missing. This idea sounds simple, almost obvious. But it's deeply uncomfortable, because it removes the fantasy of rescue. If love is a choice, then no one is coming to save you from inaction. Relationship research is clear on this. Long-term satisfaction depends far more on daily intentional behaviors than on emotional intensity. Feelings fluctuate. Choices accumulate. During those weeks, I realized how often I had outsourced love to mood. If I felt close, I engaged. If I felt tired or distant, I waited. This is common. Psychologists call it affect-dependent behavior, acting only when emotions align. The problem is, emotions are unreliable leaders. They follow context, stress, sleep, hormones. Waiting for them is like waiting for perfect weather. I tested a different approach. I chose love as behavior. Speaking gently even when I felt flat. Listening even when my attention drifted. Choosing presence without expecting instant warmth. The brain resists this at first because it prefers reciprocity. Why should I go first? But neuroscience shows that prosocial actions often generate the emotion they seem to require. Behavior pulls emotion behind it. This choice showed up in language too. English stopped being something I practiced only when confident. I used it as a tool of care. As lower pace. Clearer words. Less performance. Linguistic studies show that communication quality improves when speakers prioritize intent over accuracy. People feel cared for, not evaluated. The most important shift was internal. When love became a choice, resentment had nowhere to hide. Resentment feeds on passivity. When you act, you regain dignity. You may not control the outcome, but you control your contribution. That's psychologically stabilizing. Here's where the message turns hopeful. Choosing love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It means choosing how you show up. Boundaries are choices too. Saying not now or I need space can be acts of love when spoken clearly. Relationship psychology emphasizes that clarity, not compliance, builds respect. I noticed my kids responding again. When love is active, children feel anchored. They don't need perfection. They need predictability. Choice creates rhythm. Rhythm creates safety. This doesn't mean love fixes everything. It means it moves things forward. Waiting freezes. Choosing moves. If you're learning English, this applies directly. Don't wait to feel confident to speak. Choose to speak because communication matters. Confidence is a side effect, not a prerequisite. Love is not rescue. It's participation. Quiet. Consistent. Sometimes boring. Always powerful. When you stop waiting for love to happen and start choosing it, you don't become heroic. You become present. And presence changes everything. Speaking again slowly. There is something almost rebellious about speaking slowly in a world that rewards speed. Fast answers sound confident. Quick reactions look intelligent. Slowness, on the other hand, is often mistaken for weakness. But during those weeks, speaking slowly became the most powerful choice I made, not just for English but for my life. I didn't slow down because I was trying to learn. I slowed down because I needed to stay present. When you speak quickly, your brain stays in prediction mode, racing ahead to avoid mistakes. When you slow down, your nervous system shifts. Breathing deepens. Attention returns. Neuroscience shows that slower speech reduces cognitive load and improves emotional regulation. In simple terms, your brain feels safer. At first, it felt uncomfortable. Pauses felt exposed. Silence felt heavy. This is normal. The brain associates pauses with risk. Someone might judge you, interrupt you, or misunderstand you. But here's the truth. Pauses are where meaning forms. Language processing research confirms that listeners understand slow, deliberate speech more deeply, even if it sounds less fluent. Speaking slowly changed my conversations at home. Instead of reacting, I responded. Instead of defending, I explained. Simple sentences. Clear intention. This reduced misunderstandings instantly. Relationship studies show that communication clarity matters more than emotional intensity. When people understand each other, conflict loses its edge. English benefited in the same way. I stopped rushing to sound natural and focused on being understandable. This is a key principle in communicative language teaching: intelligibility over perfection. When you aim to be understood, not impressive, communication opens. Something else happened too. My inner dialogue slowed down. I stopped mentally rehearsing conversations before they happened. I spoke from where I was, not where I wished I was. Psychologists call this present moment expression, and it reduces anxiety significantly. My kids responded immediately. When adults slow down, children feel invited in. They interrupt less. They listen more. This isn't coincidence. Children attune to pacing. Slower speech signals availability, safety, attention. This part of the journey felt like healing. Not dramatic healing. Nervous system healing. Speaking slowly wasn't a technique. It was a boundary against overwhelm. It said, I will not rush myself to earn connection. Here's the encouraging part. You don't lose respect by slowing down. You gain clarity. People may wait, but they also lean in. Slowness creates gravity. If English feels hard, try this. Slow your speech before you simplify your vocabulary. Speed is the real barrier. Slowness gives your brain time to choose words instead of grabbing them. Speaking again slowly didn't make me fluent overnight. It made me present immediately. And presence is the foundation of everything else. Learning, love, connection. You don't need to be rescued to speak. You need space. Give it to yourself. Not rescued, but awake. There's a strange relief that comes when you finally stop waiting. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that feels like victory. The quiet kind, when you realize no one is coming to rescue you, and instead of panic, you feel clarity. That was the ending of these 4 weeks for me. Not rescued, but awake. For a long time, I thought awakening would feel dramatic. Like a decision etched in stone. But psychology tells a different story. Most lasting change happens through cognitive reappraisal, when the meaning of your situation changes, even if the situation itself does not. My life didn't suddenly become easier. My marriage didn't become perfect. My English didn't become fluent overnight. What changed was the story I told myself about all of it. I stopped telling the story of waiting. Waiting for love to feel safe. Waiting for confidence to appear. Waiting for someone else to notice my effort and step in. That story was heavy because it placed power outside of me. When I let it go, something lighter replaced it, responsibility without shame. This is where the message becomes genuinely positive. Responsibility is not punishment. It's permission. It means you're allowed to act without guarantees. Behavioral science shows that agency, the belief that your actions matter, is one of the strongest predictors of resilience. Not optimism. Not talent. Agency. When I accepted that love isn't rescue, love didn't disappear. It matured. It became something I practiced instead of something I waited to receive. Marriage felt less like a test and more like a shared process. Parenting felt less anxious and more grounded. Even my children changed, not because I fixed them, but because I stopped drifting. English followed the same pattern. I didn't conquer it. I returned to it. Slowly. Gently. In real moments. Language learning research confirms this. Sustainable progress comes from integration, not intensity. English stopped being a separate project and became part of my voice. Awakening didn't mean I stopped struggling. It meant I stopped interpreting struggle as failure. Stress became a signal instead of a verdict. Fatigue became information instead of proof that I was behind. This reframing is well documented in psychology. When you change interpretation, the nervous system responds differently. Here's the part one want you to hold on to if nothing else. You are not broken because you're tired. You are not lazy because you're waiting. You learn to wait because waiting once kept you safe. Now it's time to update the pattern. You don't need a rescuer. You need a moment of honesty. A sentence spoken earlier than usual. A choice made without emotional permission. That's how awakening begins. Not with courage, but with movement. If you're listening to this while feeling stuck, disconnected, or quietly disappointed in yourself, let me say this clearly, you're closer than you think. Awareness means the door is already open. You don't have to run through it. Just step. I wasn't rescued these past 4 weeks in the United States. I woke up. And waking up, it turns out, is enough to keep going. If you're still here, it's probably not because of perfect English or a dramatic story. It's because something in this journey felt familiar. We've all waited, waiting for love to feel easier, for someone to understand us, for our English to finally be good enough, for life to slow down before we start living. But here's the truth this story keeps pointing to: love isn't rescue. No one is coming to pull you out of your life for you. What changed everything for me in these 4 weeks wasn't America, marriage, or suddenly improving my English. It was awareness. The moment I stopped waiting and started noticing my emotions, my silence, my words, things began to move. Slowly. Naturally. One sentence at a time. Real English. Real life. This channel isn't about fast fluency or flashy promises. It's about real English story practice, slow, clear English through real stories of love, marriage, family, and personal growth. Stories where English is not the goal, but the bridge. If you're tired, unmotivated, or quietly stuck, the next video might give you a perspective you didn't know you needed. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter of this journey. Leave a comment with one simple sentence: I will stop waiting. Say it for yourself. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who might also be waiting. This journey isn't over. It's just opening another door. And the next video will explore a choice most people avoid until they're ready to change. Stay with me.